Today I'm with the founder of Unruly. Unruly is was it a game company? Is it an educational product company? What is it?
Educational technology. So we work with elementary and middle schools, and Unruly Studios combines STEM education with active recess style play for students. And we do that. We have our first product, Unruly Splats, which are these. This is an Unruly Splat. It is a durable floor button that lights up, makes sound, and senses when it's stepped on. So there's lots of LED lights in here. It makes sounds and it senses when students stomp on it. So it's meant for active play, games like tag, recess style, capture the flag, obstacle courses, and then through Bluetooth, the splats connect to a tablet or a Chromebook, and kids can actually change the rules and modify the rules using a kid-friendly coding language, which is where we integrate the STEM education. So they create their own rules, which is why we're called Unruly, and they make different changes to how it keeps score, the timing, the light patterns, different types of relay races, things that they might invent.
So Bryanne, you've been through tons of different programs at Babson and Techstars and all that. Can you just share with me, when you have a mentor that works for you, like what's the nature of that relationship and how does that relationship evolve?
Oh my gosh. Well, so over the years, I've definitely met mentors who have become a major part of the company and who have really been along for the ride, I would say, is kind of how I think about it. When it really works is it's someone, for me, it's typically someone who's been through a particular part of my business before, whether that's on the business side, building a business, or maybe on the product side, building out a certain type of this product or manufacturing a product like this or creating an app like this. And I think when it really works, they are mentors for me, have been able to challenge my own thinking, in some ways make me think bigger or get out of kind of, I'm in the day-to-day all the time. I'm the CEO, I'm working with the team all the time. I'm in some ways in the micro pieces of Unruly. And so helping me kind of step out and look at the macro vision and long-term, and help make decisions based on the long-term as well has been really helpful. So I think those are some key things that mentors have definitely done for me. And of course, when there's something that comes up that I've never been through before, they might be someone that I have a relationship with. I can call on the spot or ask a really quick question, or they may have someone in their network that can help with a certain problem. So it's really just been forming this relationship where they're up to date on what the business is doing, and I'm able to go to them for advice around different things.
So I know, since I've known you throughout your business career, sometimes you've been assigned a mentor and sometimes you have found a mentor. Can you talk about the distinction between those processes of finding or being assigned?
So some of the accelerators I've done, we did the Techstars program in Seattle. We did Learn Launch Accelerator. So sometimes they have assigned mentors. Typically with those, you do get a say, a little bit like you kind of meet a bunch of mentors and you decide which one you want to work with, and they decide which entrepreneurs they want to work with. So it's sort of a matching program is usually what we've seen. And that works well. We've met some really great people in that way. And then sometimes they assign, like, let's say like a lead partner who might be on the investment arm, who's your person who you meet with every week. And I had a really good experience with that at Learn Lunch, being assigned to Tatiana Estaskina over there, and she was amazing, and just kind of like dove into the details of the business. Like at that point, we were doing our first financial model, and she was like really in there, had done that before a lot, and helped me learn it so that in the future I could do it myself and really update the financials myself, stuff like that.
What are some of the best characteristics of a good, strong mentor? You said, oh, she was amazing. Like she dug in, that's the one thing you talk about, but what other characteristics do great mentors have?
I think the ability to dig in. I think sometimes, particularly, I'm a female founder and a first-time founder. And so the people who can kind of help me think bigger in some ways sometimes, and that's been helpful. Also, in terms of her, with the way she was digging in, it was like digging into the financials and fundraising and really like helping me define a process and keeping me accountable for that process. And that was our first round that we raised out of the Learn Launch program, about 600,000 for our pre-seed round. We've now since raised more than $3 million over the course of a couple of rounds, but being able to kind of be held accountable, dig into the details, that was really helpful in that early days. My first time ever fundraising, new skill for me. So I think that's always really helpful, having someone who can dig in.
How do you, I mean, you've had multiple mentors sometimes at the same time, I'm sure. Like, how do you navigate when one mentor says one thing and another one says another thing? And how do you be the expert when you're getting expertise from other people?
Right. Well, we call that mentor whiplash.
Yep.
And having gone through multiple accelerators, I've definitely had it before. The way that I always do navigate it is that I kind of, I really listen to people around areas where they've been successful in the past. So if I'm trying to find out something about manufacturing and I hear 3 different things, but the person who's telling me the one thing that I go with is usually the one who has done this 50 times before. Like, I want to believe that person. I know they've done it before. The other piece is you start to sort of hear when you're, doing a lot of research or just talking to a lot of people, you kind of start to hear the same advice over. And as soon as I've heard it a couple of times from kind of places where I've seen success, like another startup that's seen success in that category or something like that, then I kind of believe it. For me, I tend to like reach out to experts. Like, I definitely seek out experts around certain problems, even if it's just a small problem. I would want to ask a person who's been in this type of situation before from a hardware startup position who's maybe related in ed tech, and I might want to ask that person versus just a general, I don't know. But in some ways, I also sort of I say that, but I also kind of take from outside the industry too. Within ed tech, there's a certain way of selling and there's a certain kind of sales cycle and things like that. And I kind of tend to try to take advice around sales from general SaaS companies and just outside of the ed tech industry, because I think we can learn a lot from that. There's a lot more companies who have scaled in that sector. And while I want to know that there are specifics to ed tech that are different, I kind of like to take advice from a different industry and apply it to education, because we're unruly, like we're trying to do things differently. And we've seen that really work. We've had a much faster sales cycle than most ed tech companies, where we can sell, between 1 and 3 months of a first contact with a new lead, we can sell a new deal. And usually it's a 6 to 12 month process for, say, another ed tech startup. So we've kind of tried to take from outside the industry as well.
Yeah, what I remember in your early days, some early days was like what, 4 years? I thought you've been busy like 4 years, 5 years, maybe 5 years.
Yeah, I started it while I was at Babson in the MBA program. So I was kind of like part-time doing it in school at that point, but really started working full-time on it 2017, 2018.
So the one thing I remember is you were really great at cold calling people to find mentors in different areas. Can you talk a little bit about how you found some folks and how you did the cold call, and what value proposition did you give to them as to why they should give you the time of day?
I cold called a lot of like early kind of just to learn from the market, like people who ran after school programs or different places where I could learn a bit. I wanted to talk to strangers at that point. I wanted to hear unbiased, unfiltered advice around what were their current problems and what they thought about my idea. So I did a lot more of that on that side. In terms of cold calling, I never really cold called advisors, but I had a lot of cases where I would be interested in talking with a certain founder or a certain person because I knew they would be really relevant to what I was doing and I thought they would like what I was doing. And so I did some so maybe they would be on a panel and I would actually go up to them after and meet them. And that's actually led to some relationships that I'm still in touch with, of companies in our space who now are really kind of have been mentoring me over time. And just kind of, that was pretty cool. I mean, I just walked up, told him I did have a mutual connection, like a mutual friend, a professor at Olin, who I was able to kind of mention, and it wasn't completely cold, but it was like a stranger walking up to them after. And that's been really helpful. I think like when you're connecting over something that really is truly related, it can help a lot. So it wasn't completely cold in that way. And then warm intros as well, like just getting an intro and keeping people informed as you grow the company too. That helped me build relationships.
So on the other side of the fence, can you talk about any really negative experiences you might have had with either a mentor, an advisor? Has anyone just sort of like gotten in your way or just stopped you in your tracks?
Um, huh. I haven't had anything like where it's been really negative with someone I've been working with over time. I think if anything, it's just I don't end up working with someone if if the first meeting kind of ends up being something where I don't feel like it's clicking, and that goes both ways too. Like there's very much like going to be meetings where I don't click with that mentor as well. So it's really finding a match, and I think in that way maybe it would just be um, someone who kind of is like really adamant about advice in one way but doesn't necessarily understand like our business or something. And if I feel like that's the case, then I don't want to be like first educating them on our market and trying to get advice like and educate. So I feel like if it's like a better sign to me if someone's like, well, I know from this experience that this is how I might do it, but I understand your market's different, and so would it apply, and like kind of working together on that, instead of kind of just being like, I'm right, I know everything. Like that's usually not a good place
Yeah.
to come from.
So
Yeah.
what's intriguing, which I just learned about, is that you've been a mentor yourself in the I-Corps program, and so how did you make that transition? Like what did you learn from being mentored to now you are on the other side of the fence there, and what were the first meetings like that you learned from the previous part of that, your own your own experience of being mentored or supported?
Yeah, so that all started actually a founder at one of the ed tech trade shows we were at came up to me and told me what she was working on. She was just about to graduate undergrad and was kind of applying for this program. And over time, I chatted with her a few times over the course of a year, basically. And I just thought she had a lot of potential as a founder. And so she had asked me if I would be a mentor in that program. And I decided it would be a good experience for me as well. Having been mentored so much, like I also kind of a couple years into the business and having kind of scaled in some ways, I thought I could provide some help and some guidance. So I thought I'd learn a lot. So I did. I think, yeah, it was different from obviously managing a company. I mean, you don't have the control that you do where you're kind of making decisions and they're happening and they're being implemented. Like you're much more on the sidelines giving advice, and then they may take it, they may not, and you're kind of watching what happens. So I learned a lot from that, and definitely appreciated the time that my mentors had put in based on how much time it takes to be a really good mentor
It's
for
really
somebody.
interesting. So mentors tend to be very successful. They are highly experienced, and then they have no control, right? So how do you deal with that? You give advice, they don't listen to you, and now you're like, wait a minute, I'm the expert here. Like, how do you feel in that environment when you're mentoring someone who's not listening to you?
Um, I mean, I've totally not listened to mentors in the past as well. Like, I think that's fair. And I would tell people, like, and I have a lot of advisors, mentors who will tell me, like, take my advice if you take it or leave it, like take my advice if you want it or don't, like, because this is my experience. If my gut would say this. And so that's kind of how I treat it too, is like, you're the one in charge of this. You know more about this particular venture than I do. You've been working on it for 2 years. Like, so take my advice with like that lens as well. So I like to, like, I'm okay if they're not taking all the advice. But and then it's, I think just you're watching them go through a learning journey too. So they have to make mistakes to get better. And I've made so many mistakes over the course of building my business. And I'm sure I'm sure mentors have seen me do that, and they probably knew how to avoid it in some ways, but how would I get better if I don't actually make some of these mistakes myself, right? And I see that with my team now too, where I'm not necessarily a mentor, but in a coaching position in some ways, and kind of, we make mistakes all the time. That's how you grow and iterate and create a company. So just kind of letting the team go through some of those too is important.
Yeah. So what are some of the characteristics do you think of a great mentor? There's some characteristics that sort of stand out for you?
Um, I think that they definitely need to be good listeners, need to be willing to challenge you and really kind of tell you when you're wrong, or at least like, speak up if they feel like something's really off. I've had a lot of mentors who've been able to do that for me and kind of also like just take me out of the day to day. Like I said, thinking bigger, being able to think outside the box, willing to share your network is really helpful. Introductions go a long way. I mean, mentors have led me to other mentors who have become part of our extended, whether advisors or joining our board and things like that. And those are probably the ones that I would say are really important. Yeah, and I think you just want to make sure you have a good working relationship with them too. Like the expectations clear about time commitments and things like that. And it doesn't mean that your mentors all have to give a ton of time. Like I have some mentors I talk to maybe once or twice a year, but I'm still in touch with them and it's kind of understood and stuff like that.
Yeah. So do you, I've heard from some entrepreneurs, they're like, oh, I don't need a mentor. I could just do it. I don't really need that kind of help. I'm just sort of going forward and I'll figure it out. Like, what would you say to someone like that?
I think especially if it's their first time starting a company, even if it's probably your like third or fourth time, I would say you can always benefit from mentors. But there's just so much you're going to learn that you don't know. And it's all different spans. It's around building a company, but also, managing a team, and also like all of these different kind of pieces that people have been through before and can really provide a lot, like save you a lot of time and money, I would say, is what our mentors have been able to do for us, is like hearing from a mentor about a time when they have done something and made a big mistake, and kind of hearing that firsthand and then like being able to avoid that mistake. It just like saves so much time and money for you and your team. So I feel like that, that is why you should definitely have mentors around you. And that's the thing, you don't always have to listen to them, but having that like sounding board, maybe a couple different people that you're able to get bounce ideas off of, or your latest plans or the different milestones you're working on, it just helps you refine and focus and make sure you're focused on the right things, which is a huge thing for startups. You have to be focused. And if you're focused on the wrong thing, like that's when you waste money and time and hire the wrong teams for the wrong things. So I think that's helpful.
Yeah. Can you think of a time when you were going 100 miles an hour and a mentor or an advisor turned to you and saying, I don't know, I think you're going in the wrong direction here, but did you consider these things? Can you think of a moment like that and share that story with us?
We had like, before we raised our seed round, we were kind of targeting two markets. So we were targeting the consumer market with flats and for parents at home. And we were kind of starting to see this market forming around education, being in schools. And so a lot of mentors would tell us either like, you need to pick one market, it's too hard to do two, which I agreed with at the time. Like I knew we needed to pick a market, but the actual market to pick was tough because we didn't really have enough experience in either, I would say, to really see which one had the traction and which one had the product market fit. So I think in that way we were being told a lot, like you need to pick one, not do both. And I knew that. And it was just kind of like at that point, and then at one point we just saw it, like the data was there. All these schools were buying them in bulk and like really using them a lot. And it was just like way earlier than we ever thought. So I always thought schools would be a secondary kind of thing. They would find us much later in our history because it would take them longer to adopt, all the reasons why ed tech, the sales cycle being slow. And it just wasn't the case. Like they were just buying it overnight, large amounts. And so I was realizing that from the data we were seeing, that was clearly the right choice. And so we made the choice to stop selling to the consumer market and really change our entire pricing model and the way that we offered services and the way we did business, and to focus on the education market. So I would say like we were definitely hearing that a lot. And I think that everyone telling us that was right. I think focusing on the consumer market would have been the wrong decision. And there definitely were people telling us to do that, but you never know. I mean, it'd just be a different business we would have built, right? So maybe it wasn't the wrong decision, but for us, it was where we were seeing the traction is what we went with. So the data also helped.
So because you have a physical product, um, and with a virtual product as well, I mean, what happened during when we got into COVID and you had to pivot to something? Have you pivoted, and are you pivoting more towards now, or really preparing for when this whole thing is going to lift? And what kind of advisors did you use or mentors to help you think that through when that happened, when schools were not meeting anymore?
Yeah, so I've been lucky to have a really involved and super, super effective board for the last year since we raised our seed round. And so we have 3 board members, and along with myself. And so they were definitely, and I would consider them mentors as well, but they were really involved in that transition, as well as my own team. So we did a lot of internal meetings thinking about, we surveyed the market. We did a survey with over 200 educators and principals, just to kind of learn a snapshot of what was going on and really hear directly from them. Because that's where I, like, in terms of listening, like, I would listen to a customer over almost anyone. And so like we definitely kind of leaned on that. And then just, we did a lot of internal kind of planning out. We, of course, thought about all these different things we might do that were, in different industries or things like that if we needed to. We ultimately landed on being able to help schools with a virtual and hybrid offering. And it was not a heavy lift for us to make our product work in that environment. And so we've spent time like developing resources and about 20 hours of content around virtual learning for this fall. And ultimately, we are definitely, kind of making sure that it's clear that slats are a really flexible product, that they can be used in school with social distancing. They can be used at home virtually without the slats, without the physical slats, or in a hybrid setting where you're coding at home in the classroom setting and then playing at school or things like that. So we basically just leaned into that. And then we worked with a lot of mentors on that, just from getting feedback on the plan. I like to do that a lot. Like, our team will put together a plan, and we, either I'll present it to the board, or we are just talking through the milestones and goals that we've set, things like that, just kind of refining the goals, making sure it's really focused on the right things. And then, yeah, I think just talking with people in the industry was really helpful through this. So mentors who are at much larger ed tech companies that are already, maybe they're in like over 10,000 schools already. We're in like 200, like around 200 plus. So kind of learning from them, like they have a lot more access to schools than we do. And so like learning really firsthand from someone in that position, that was helpful, very helpful to hear from industry leaders as well. And I was lucky they were willing to take the time with me as well. And I've been excited, that the reason why mentorship works is I think like you both, you get time from a mentor who's willing to give it to you, and you give it as well to people who ask, like when I was asked to be a mentor on the iCorp project. So definitely it's like something you give back to as well.
Great. Thank you very much for taking the time. This has been really helpful and insightful. And just like your mentoring people has been helpful, I'm hoping that your words will help mentors and mentees around the world. And of course, this program is in Macedonia, but thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.